Shalom, shalom. So, shalom, shalom. I decided I'm going to read from Order of Emanation, but we're going to read really Parable of the King. And I'm just going to do the parable. And then depending on how that goes, I will go into the revealed levels of it. Alright. So this is Parable of the King by Yera Ha'ari. And maybe I should have done 18 plus on this because it is a little graphic. But once understood what's happening here through this parable, even the vulgar parts are alluding to very deep things that happen on a very daily rate. It's kind of terrifying, actually, especially if I could give you guys my eyes, you would understand what I'm trying to say here. But nonetheless, this parable has a lot to do with the way the world is now, and what's to be done about it, what can happen, what might happen, and it's a scary thing knowing how many people don't know and knowing how many people that do. Both those aspects are terrifying. Knowing that some people know and still nothing's happening, or I don't know what's worse, or knowing that a whole bunch of people don't know. And so those who have ears to hear this parable. It is written by Yera Ha'ari, the most righteous of our generation for sure. And this information is a gift. And so I will elaborate, but first I will give the parable. So it's written, "This is like a king who had 4 princes. He then instructed them to go forth and build new kingdoms. And the first prince built a kingdom in the stars, the second prince built a kingdom in the air, the third prince built the kingdom on a garbage dump, and the fourth kingdom was built in a deep valley. Each prince had laid laws for the kingdom they ruled over. The first kingdom was according to the light, and the second kingdom was according to the deeds of its people, and the third kingdom was according to good and evil, and the fourth kingdom, their laws were according to darkness. Many years later, and many generations later, the people of the kingdom began to see the prince of each kingdom as the king. They saw the laws of their land and said, 'These are the laws of the king.' And one day the king heard a report of his rebellion in the kingdoms. It was reported that the princes had made themselves kings. And so what did the king do? He chose a certain poor person to be his delegate, as it is written, 'Better is a poor and wise son.' He gave to that poor person the insignia and the seal of the king, and he tasked him to enter the kingdom that had rebelled. The king said to himself, "If these people are of my kingdom, then they will abide by my laws, and if they have indeed abandoned my laws, they will be exposed by this poor person." It was a custom of the king to honor the poor person, and so if they indeed abandoned the laws of the king in rebellion, they would disregard this poor person. He gave his insignia and seal to this poor person and said to him, "You are my delegate, and as long as you have this insignia and seal, you are a representative of the king, and what is done to you is done to me. And now, go to the kingdom, and I will send you and show them this seal." He then gathered an elite guard and said to them, "This poor person cannot defend himself. Disguise yourself so that the inhabitants of the kingdom do not recognize you, and watch over my delegate. What is done to him is done to me, and so if they curse them, you will curse them, and if they injure him, you will injure them. However, if they bless him, you will bless them." The king then gathered an army and gathered outside the surrounding walls of the kingdom. And he said to his delegate, "If this kingdom has indeed come into rebellion, I will lay it to waste. As it is written, 'Lift up your eyes, and behold, the heavens will pass away like vapor, and the earth will pass away like a garment.'" It was a custom of each kingdom to have walls higher than every building in the kingdom, and so that the inhabitants of the kingdom could not see beyond the walls, and none could see the king's arms as it surrounded them, preparing to besiege this kingdom. The king said to his delegate, this certain poor person, "Now I have given you my insignia and seal, and it is time to enter this kingdom. Show the inhabitants there of this insignia and seal, and if they recognize it, then they recognize me. Be careful to be amongst the people of this kingdom, and whilst you are there, abide by the laws of this kingdom." Thus, a certain poor person entered the kingdom made on a garbage dump. He walked amongst the people, and the people did not recognize him, and he saw that the nature of this kingdom was for children and for people to be raised by animals. He came to a certain person raised by animals and showed him the insignia and seal of the king. And what did he do? He rolled in the mud and heaped garbage all over himself. He came to another person raised by animals and showed him the seal of the king. And what did he do? He walked into a herd of animals and was never seen again. He walked through the kingdom, and he saw a certain beggar. And the beggar said to the delegate, "I am hungry, please feed me." And so the certain poor person gave to him the food of the king. And what did he do? He proclaimed aloud, "This is not food. We only eat the shit of animals and garbage in this place." And immediately he rejected the food of the king. A pig walked by, and it began to defecate. As soon as it had finished, it produced a white pile of dung, the size of a white donkey. And what happened? The beggar rushed to the pile of dung and began to gorge himself. And the nature of animals is to eat the dung of animals. He walked by a certain house and saw an older woman, and she begged for water. And the certain poor person said to her, "Here is the water of the king." And what did she do? A certain dog emerged from the house and defecated, and she ran and consumed it and proclaimed, "I will eat now and seek water tomorrow." He came to a certain homeless person and said, "Sir, I have no place to live," and he gave to him a place to rest by the king. And what did he do? He proclaimed aloud, "We make our houses out of garbage, and this is clearly not garbage, and he immediately ran into a pile of garbage and heaped it upon himself. The delegate approached the gates of the courthouse, and what did he see? He saw animals making laws. And he approached the castles, and what did he see? Animals at the gate. A certain poor person raised up the insignia and seal of the king and proclaimed, "Hear ye, kingdom of the garbage dump. The king has surrounded this land and is prepared to besiege it." And what did they do? Each of them cackled like a hyena. Others jumped from the windows and laughed like monkeys, and a certain pig came forward from the kingdom and pissed, and all of the animals rushed to drink it up, and an ox came and defecated immediately and ran and consumed it. Some birds were high up on the castle walls and threw trash down immediately, and they ran and clothed themselves in the garbage. Finally, the delegate came to a certain gathering spot. One scoffed and immediately suffered a seizure. Another laughed, and immediately his family perished. Another mocked, and immediately boiling pig fat fell upon him, and he became disfigured. The certain poor person arrived at the foundation stone of the kingdom, where he had found people who had heard of the old ways. He showed them their insignia and seal of the king, and they believed and said, "What do we do?" The delegate replied, "Make for yourself a copy of this seal and insignia, and keep it with you. And when the king destroys this kingdom, he will see this insignia and spare you. However, if you leave it and do not take it with you, then you will perish." One of them brought forth food for the delegate, another brought forth a carriage, another a horse, one clothing, and they said to him, "We see you are poor in this place, but take what we have to spare, and may you succeed in your mission." The delegate left the kingdom and returned to the king, and he shares with him all of the things that happened. And what did the king do? His army besieged the city, and he prepared boiling pits of excrement and tossed them into it. And he also prepared giant fires for the garbage and threw others into that. He burst the bowels of others and scoffed at them. He laughed as the dung split from their innards, and he spread dung on their faces, as it is written, "I will spread dung on your faces, and also I will mock you from the heavens and laugh when terror seizes you." The king then saw the certain poor person who cleaved to the insignia and seal of the king's authority, and he had mercy on them immediately, and when they were received into his kingdom, they were honored, for what was done to his delegate was done to him. He then dragged the prince out of the castle, and then executed him, and the seal and insignia of the king was driven through his body, and placed at the top of the rubble that was made from the kingdom of the garbage dump. Immediately they were all garbed in beautiful garments of light, and a procession went forth and proclaimed that this is the faithful king. Each was given according to what he had done for the king. Then later, demons saw the authority of the king, and by his seal and insignia he proclaimed aloud, "Pay homage to the king." And the angels saw the seal and insignia, and they bent a knee to serve their master. And as for the garbage dump, as it had never existed, blotted out. And so it is written, "They are as nothing and less than nothing." Amen. So this parable, for those of you still around, looks like I have nobody in here. Oh, here's the AI thing, though, where it tries to talk about...
The summary?
Yeah. I see it now. Yeah. Oh, Sacred Rose is still here. Awesome. Cool. So someone was here for that. That's good. So I'll continue. So this is a parable. I don't know if you've read it before, but this parable was written by Yira. And this parable, although graphic, it really starts to make sense when you really understand some of the mysteries. And so to that, I guess I could just do a quick little breakdown. So in Kabbalah, there's 4 worlds. And these worlds are often talked about pretty much through all commentaries, Kabbalistic commentaries. And the kingdom of the garbage dump represents a specific world called Yetzirah. So, just as an example, I'll take this effect off. So, here you'll see the 4 worlds in the classical Zoharic tree. This is your classical Kabbalah Center tree, and so the worlds are a little different in that breakdown. Essentially what it is Atzilus is Hokmah Bina, Beriah is Bina, and then Yetzirah, these bottom 6 here, is the kingdom of the garbage dump. And so these are what we call the forms. And these forms are very, very important to understand and even have a glimmer of, really, in order to move forward in any type of Kabbalistic study. Here's the worlds again. And so the forms are 6 vessels that are within your body. And some of you that have been in spiritual teachings might recognize some of these forms, actually, because they're talked about in a lot of teachings. But so, as we understand that Zeir Anpin is called a bush, as opposed to the whole tree of life being called a tree, the bottom 7 are just called a bush, and it looks like a little bush, right? And if you notice, there's the burning bush from the Bible, and you'll see that fire burns in all of these colors, which is why the burning bush parable is alluding to this, actually. And so this is the world of Yetzirah, right? You got the world of action and the world of formation, which is Asiya and Yetzirah. And then you have 2 other worlds. I'll get into that in a minute. But Asiya is physical reality, right? Because this is the world of action. Even not acting is an action, right? So we can understand that this is the world of action. And then above that world is the world of formation, where our forms are. And collectively, we all have these vessels, but they make a giant dimension that is known of Yetzirah. And these forms are called rivers, right? And so they actually connect to each other, right? The spirit form to the spirit form, the desire form to the desire form, the emotion to the emotion. This happens in arguments or talks, when you have good talks with your friends, really good conversations. These forms are literally seeing eye to eye. And each of these are actually called eyes. They're called the 7 eyes of Hashem, right? And so these forms are the kingdom of the garbage dump. And the prince that made himself king and tricked all the inhabitants is considerably this 7-headed serpent here. Here it is in the classical tree. Chesed is the spirit form, desire form, holy form, soul form, emotional form, mental form. All of these pool into the mental form and then housed in the physical. So the methods of the Kabbalistic second school techniques of ascension, which are practical, and you can learn these right now and actually experience the upper worlds, the idea is learning how to bypass these forms, because they act as a revolving sword which turns every which way. It's basically an entity that shapeshifts on you and floods you with information, and it blocks you out from the upper worlds, being Bina, Hokmah, and Keter, right? This is called the garden, and then this is called the land of the fathers, because Abba is Hokmah, Abba, Ima, Zeranpin, and Nukva. These are names of Partsufim. And so you'll see the respective name of the Sphirot to its attributed form. And so this is the kingdom of the garbage dump. And these forms are called animals. But there's a lot of deep reasons why. They're not just called animals because of the parable, or even in the light that the parable is. But let me grab one more book. Just looking for a specific tikkun. You'll notice the bottom 7 are actually like an archetypal blueprint for all animals and lower kingdoms, rather than the entirety of the tree, which is like the blueprint for man. Yeah, this book's old, so it's kind of hard to turn the pages, but I could just pull out my scroll probably and show you that way. Might be a little easier. Anywho, animals are made in the likeness of the bottom 7 Sphirot. And just to save time, I think I'm going to go ahead and just skip that tikkun since it's not showing up very quickly. Nonetheless, I'll show that secret another time. So then we learn that these 7 forms have a tree inside of each one. And if you notice, they're actually in the shape of men, right? And so you have the center sphere here, which is called Israel, or Tiferes oftentimes. And so this is attributed to the holy form, right? Israel means Yeshar El, straight to God, straight to Keter. And so all of these houses will gather in to each other, and even more so in deeper Merkaba mysticism, each of these Sephirot have a little bottom 7 Sphirot, right? They'll have a blue and a red and a yellow, a green, orange, and black, just like you see here. But these are also inside of this tree, right? And so in Merkaba mysticism, they say a perfected sage ideally would have all of these little trees going and gathering into the center. And then by default, they all start to pour into this one here in the center tree. And so all of these forms have gone central pillar. And the influences, since these are called fires, right? And fire burns in all these colors. These influences I'm speaking of come from your heart, which is called a furnace, right? And so in this furnace burn 7 fires, which are these right here. And the idea is to get all of these fires to go central pillar, and then ultimately getting your entire chariot to go central pillar, gathering into the holy form and ascending upwards, right? But like I said earlier, this thing is like a revolving sword. It's like an entity that switches and shapeshifts on you and blocks you from being able to ascend into the higher worlds. This is an extremely important mechanism to understand, because without this understanding, you won't really understand like what you're doing, right? But now, enough talking about how it works, like how do we do it, right? For those of you who don't know Yira's work, it's through the Lashon HaKodesh, right? The holy Hebrew letters. And when you learn these letters, you learn the principles of reality, right? And you'll learn that there's collectively 22 principles, or actually 23 in this case, and they all work together in a brilliant spectrum inside of a thing we call the hard spark, which is the all potentiality for all possibilities, anything you can do. And it's there, everything that's possible in the world of Asiya is rooted in a letter. Just trying to get to the crown jewel here. Shwam, the holy Hebrew letters and their principles. And so, for example, I can show you guys even English, right? We know Aleph is A, Mem is M, right? So you got Ah, okay? This is the throat, this is the lips. Ah, And when you mix them together, you put the throat, the lips together, you get the letter B, bait, B, right? And so the word bait in Hebrew means house, okay? And so you'll see Aleph houses Mem, and Mem houses Aleph, meaning air houses water, and water houses air, right? Remember, the throat. What else goes through the throat? Air. You breathe, right? And then the letters ride your breath out into physical reality through sound, right? And so these two letters both mix to create bait. B. It's the lips and the throat. So the principles and the sounds mix, right? And that's just one tiny example for those that aren't familiar with the crown jewel. If you were to study this entire crown jewel, which here's the breakdown here, right? It shows you the first 3 principles: land, water, fire, air, right? Which is also energy, gases, liquids, and solids, the 4 main building blocks of reality, right? And then we learn that we have receivers for these things. We have eyes that take in light, nose that takes in air, and a mouth that takes in liquids and solids. And it will always be in this order: light on top of air, on top of liquids and solids. For example, our body, the brain, which is a light processor, is on top of the lungs, breathing air, on top of the stomach, processing liquids and solids. You look out into space, light on top of atmosphere, gases on top of liquid and solids. A plant takes in light via the flowers. The leaves are underneath this, converting atmospheric substance, and then in between the flower and then the roots, processing minerals and water. Even the temple, you got the menorah, liquids and solids for the shewbread, and the incense for air. Now here's your bait, house. This is when the mother letters, which was this that we just went through, blending together to create different letters. And it goes through and it teaches you this entire process of how the 22 letters are birthed from the original 3, and then eventually double letters start mixing with mother letters, and in turn they start creating the elemental letters out here. So yeah. So this is the book called Likutei Yera. You can get it on Amazon. I'm not sure how much it is, but I highly recommend it. Once you learn this, then you can understand the parable I just read. Right? So, let's go ahead and go back to that a little bit. Here's some pictures of the forms already. Right? Because this is exactly the kingdom of the garbage dump. Right? And so to explain the beginning of the parable, the princes had made 4 kingdoms. Right? It said one was according to the stars, one was in the air, one was in the kingdom of the garbage dump, and then one was in a deep valley. Right? And so, as we learn, Shin, Aleph, Mem, light, air, liquids, and solids, these are these princes. Right? And these are the kingdoms here. And so, Kabbalistically, these are their attributed worlds and attributed father letter, being the letters of the holy name. So you see Atzilus, Berea, Yetzirah, and Asiya. And so the kingdom of the garbage dump, do-do-do-do-do, bing, 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 Yetzirah. Right? So that's our forms. We learn this at the beginning. That's this. Right? So, now that we see Parable of the King, the worlds in their garbage dumps, and remember, it actually says later, their laws. The first kingdom was according to light. Then, the next one was according to the deeds of its people. The third one was according to good and evil. Well, why? Because right here is good and right here is evil. And as you see in these other tikkuns, there's 2 serpents, which is your Yetzer HaTov, which means your good inclination, right? Or your good form. Yetzer means form. And then Yetzer Hara, form of evil. And so we both have a front and a back to these vessels, which are basically the good inclination of these vessels and the bad inclination of these vessels, which collectively create dross. Both of them, both the good and the evil, are a serpent. And so this is why the forms are all operating according to good and evil. Third kingdom. Third prince. So good and evil is attributed. I might as well just write that down. I don't even have my pen right now. So, now, good and evil is called going left and right. And so, this is why the serpent follows a lightning bolt pattern down the tree. And a lot of meditative New Age or occult Kabbalistic techniques will teach you that this is the path of the tree, right? And that you're supposed to ascend up that direction. But that's not how it works, because now we just learned that these are all entirely one dimension. And so you'll see the serpent makes these crooked, right? Haven't you noticed how you have to look at everything at a certain angle? This implies that the forms are crooked. And when you look at them at the right angle, then things make sense, right? Well, if these things are crooked, and it's the spirit, the desire, the soul, the emotion, mental, and holy form, if they're crooked and not straight, then our perception is like a house of mirrors, you see? And so with this being said, the method here that you learn from this book, this secret meditation, is that we gather into the center form to go up, right? We gather into the holy form, which is called Israel. And so this is what causes the real ascension, because we have this entity blocking us, right? And we can learn a little bit more secrets on that, but I think I'll go ahead and wait. But we understand that there's also these houses of idolatry, the 7 forms, 7 houses of idolatry. They have physical manifestations, and each one has a minister. There's a minister over each of these houses, and I'll give you their names: pride, greed and envy, wrath, sloth or laziness, gluttony, and lust. So we can understand these are ministers or actual entities that rule over these houses: the brain, the eyes, the hands, the chest. And they're attributed to these 7 forms as well. But yeah, so the serpent is called the crooked one. And this is why. So everything you're seeing here is just mastery of Yira. This is what happens when one befriends Yira. And so this parable is talking about a chosen delegate that's designed to come into this kingdom and reveal an insignia and a seal of the king, right? And I don't know about you, but as we were looking earlier, learning about that, looks like a seal and an insignia of a king to me, right? So, looks like we have found our chosen delegate, right? And those who have heard of the old ways help him, or at least they should. Right? There's your seal. The first key. And there's so much to this, because we also learn earlier in this book, we learn in order of emanation, right? He teaches us about the endless. That's why it's called the order of emanation. It's the order of how the endless emanated, right? And so it teaches us at the very beginning that the endless restricted itself like this, right? Precisely in the center. And it did so from all directions, right? And so when it did this, it created limits, right? See these arrows? These are limits. And the funny thing is I didn't know, I've known about this key for a long time, but he showed me this recently. This is Aleph here, the first limit. Mem. Shin. And Mem Sofit. These were the first limits, and they restricted. And so these limits were the length, width, and height and depth of this vacancy that was left, because before the endless had filled this entire vacancy, there was no vacancy, right? And the endless extended to the boundary of the endless, and there was no end to its boundary. And so Yira's words are, when it arose that it might even have a desire and a thought, it restricted itself. And then it concealed itself, right? And so the first limits were Aleph, Mem, Shin. Length, width, and height, and depth. And they gather into the center, which is called Yira, right? And this straight light in the order of emanation is called a sun. And we just read, better is a poor and wise son, referring to this delegate. And for those of you that are worried, I will be able to post this recording on YouTube, so just chill out and enjoy. So as we see, the limits went in this way too, right? Creating the length, width, height, and depth, but there was an opposite masculine effect that happened as well. And that masculine effect would be known as the father letters, which are north, east, south, and west. But also in this book, it says they are the spirit of knowledge, understanding, the spirit of might and counsel, and these are the four spirits that will be with Mashiach, right? As shown here. The three mother letters produced the three fathers. For the Zimzum was likened to the womb of a woman, emerged via the four directions, length, width, height, and depth, which are manifested potential of the mother letters. And from them they emerged in an opposite direction, for the opposite of the female is the male, and so Shin, Aleph, Mem, and Mem sets the limits, and Yud, He, Vav, He emerged by potential within the mind. And then in the center created the heart spark, which is talked about in a lot of places of the writings, actually. And yeah, but I think that'll conclude the lesson for now. We got a little bit out of the way, learned about some of the forms. If anyone's got any quick questions before I end the live, I'll go ahead and get this posted on YouTube. And blessings, guys. Thank you. Love you guys. Thank you. Blessings. Shabbat Shalom.